Viralnater presents the Golden Girls' infamous feud that ended the show. Classic cameo. You know that a show has attained true iconic status when it starts rolling in the celeb guest stars. And Golden Girls certainly had more than its fair share of iconic celeb appearances. Do you remember the classic episode, You Gotta Have Hope? It's the one where Rose tries to find her real father. Not only did the beloved Bob Hope appear in the show, but he starred as none other than himself. Approval from Disney. You might not believe it, but Disney used to own the Golden Girls. They're now one of the biggest media companies in the world. Disney, ABC Domestic Television put out this huge hit, and Michael Eisner had to give it the go-ahead. The idea was liked by the former CEO of Walt Disney Company, but he thought it wasn't current enough. Adding the character of Sophia Petrillo, played by Estelle Getty, fixed the problem. Eisner was so pleased with this move because it gave the cast a whole new lease on life. The best script ever. Sue Harris wrote the pilot for the Golden Girls. Before this show, she was planning to retire, but this show changed everything. When NBC chief Warren Littlefield read it for the first time, he fell in love with it. Everyone who quickly skimmed the pages felt the same way, even Betty White. Perhaps the best script I'd ever read. In this business, you get a lot of bad stories or dogs, she joked. And I shouldn't use that word because I love dogs. It's me, Mario. Being that the show was centered around characters of a certain age, it makes sense that someone as old and veteran as Bob Hope would appear in a special cameo. But these special appearances weren't limited to older stars. In fact, one memorable appearance came from a very young star on the cusp of his career. Remember the lovable, undocumented student called Mario? If you look closely, it's none other than Mario Lopez, well before he achieved fame on Saved by the Bell. First refusal. The cast and crew of Golden Girls had problems with Bea Arthur before the show even began. It was a sign of things to come when she first refused to take on this job. But no one paid attention because they really wanted her there. Since she'd worked with Rue McClanahan before on Maude, she didn't think the show was anything new. She also thought Betty White wasn't adding anything new, and the senior actor thought Arthur didn't like her from the start. Inspiration from real life. Every great show has something to do with real life, and the Golden Girls is no different. An executive at NBC, Brandon Tartikoff, got the idea for the show from his aunt, who is very old. After going to see her, he found it funny how she talked to her best friend and next-door neighbor. They fought and squabbled all the time, but it was clear they cared about each other. It was Tartikoff's idea to make a show about their troubled but deep friendship because he thought NBC fans would enjoy it. Mother tongue. The full name of Betty White's character was Rose Lindstrom Nyland, and she was a Norwegian American. That's why we've often heard her speaking in her mother tongue. As it turns out, not even one word she said was actually in Norwegian. White's accent and pronunciation made it seem genuine, but she was mostly talking gibberish for comical effect. The subtitles on the screen added to the humor, but they weren't a direct translation of the words she was saying, since they made zero sense. Move your body in the right direction. No matter what you think of Bea Arthur, she wasn't turning down the role on the Golden Girls because she was tough. She just thought it didn't make business sense because the directors asked her and McClanahan to play the same parts they played on Maude. She also thought Betty White wouldn't do anything different from what she did on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. McClanahan finally got her to agree by telling her that she shouldn't turn down the best story that would ever come her way. Arthur finally said yes. Equal pay. As we know, Golden Girls had several forays into other television shows, with spin-offs such as Golden Palace. Though none of them quite achieved the success of the original show, the arrangement and salaries involved were still pretty big business. Did you know that all three of the actresses who appeared in the spin-off, despite their different levels of fame and experience, all received the same pay? Isn't that amazing? Like B. Arthur. As Susan Harris was writing Dorothy, she had one person in mind, B. Arthur. At that point, she was already a big star on TV. Because of how well her show Maude did, as a winner of 1 Emmy and 5 Golden Globes, Arthur was the kind of star power they were looking for. She wasn't interested in the part, though, so Elaine Stritch was chosen by the network instead. But her test went wrong, and no one saw it coming. They didn't know what to do next. The Royal Fan. Many people all over the world loved the Golden Girls, and one of their fans was a member of the royal family. It's said that the Queen Mother loved this show so much that she wrote to the actors and asked them to perform for her. It was cool. The Queen was very pretty. We were told not to talk to her unless she talked to us first. She was up in a box and then she came down on stage with Princess Anne. Betty White said about the royal variety performance they did in 1988. What an amazing change! The mother of B. Arthur was played by Estelle Getty, who was only a year older than B. That meant she had to sit in the makeup chair for hours on end to become Sophia. Even though she was the show's oldest character, Michael Eisner of Disney thought she showed the world that women in their 60s and 70s can still feel young. It was Estelle Getty who turned our 3 women into girls. That's what made it seem like a modern young show to me, Eisner said. Having problems with B. A lot of people who love the Golden Girls know that the actors weren't best friends on set. Betty White admitted that B. Arthur wasn't her biggest fan because she didn't like how positive B was all the time. B kept the peace. She didn't like me. She was sometimes a pain in the neck because I was always cheerful, which sometimes made B mad. She would get very angry when I was happy, White remembered as she talked about their difficult relationship. Arthur's annoyances. McClanahan wasn't the only one who said Arthur was a strange and difficult woman. A lot of people didn't like her because of her different habits, but all of us do. Arthur didn't like birds or people who chew gum, but they weren't among her top hate list things. She hated shoes, and it was written in her contract that she wouldn't wear them. They let her walk around the set barefoot because she promised not to sue them if she got hurt. The oldest girl. Interestingly, Betty White had such a youthful spirit since she was the oldest member of the legendary quartet. It's even more interesting that she found her best friend on the set in Rue McClanahan, who's 12 years younger. Another amazing fact, despite being the oldest cast member, White got to play the youngest character. She was already in her late 60s when the Golden Girls came out, but so were her co-stars, B. Arthur and Estelle Getty. Put a ring on it. Even though the Golden Girls originally aired with the premise of it all being a bunch of single ladies, eventually by the end of the final season, each of the characters had gotten married or engaged. Dorothy got married in the final episode. Perhaps the gold in golden applied to the wedding bands they received from their honey. Audience participation. We know that Betty White became famous and beloved for her sunny personality, always happy to stop and meet a fan who she encountered. But did you know that this outgoing and friendly nature even showed itself actually on set? During breaks in filming, she would go and chat with the audience members. This was something that annoyed B. Arthur to no end, as she took the whole thing a lot more seriously. The Royal Fan. Many people all over the world loved the Golden Girls, and one of their fans was a member of the royal family. It's said that the Queen Mother loved the show so much that she wrote to the actors and asked them to perform for her. It was cool. The Queen was very pretty. We were told not to talk to her until she talked to us first. She was up in a box and then she came down on stage with Princess Anne, Betty White said about the royal variety performance they did in 1988. Rocky and friendship. It wasn't friendly between Arthur and Rue McClanahan, even though McClanahan knew Arthur before they started making the Golden Girls and even persuaded her to take the part. McClanahan said she was a very strange woman, but she said her friendship with White wasn't so bad. McClanahan wrote in her book, B refused to go to lunch without Betty every day. B would never walk across the lot to dinner unless Betty was ready to walk with her, even if Betty made her wait and they sat next to each other in the dining hall. It's in the bag. As well as the iconic and lovable characters, there was another super memorable thing about the beloved show: Estelle Getty's famous straw purse. Sophie carried this purse around so much during the series that it became almost a character of its own. But did you know that Getty bought this purse herself when shopping for props on the way to her audition? We wonder if she knew how iconic it would become. Royal favorite. We know that this classic sitcom had a huge slew of not only regular people adoring it across the world, but also claimed many celeb fans. But did you know that one famous face who enjoyed the iconic comedy was not only famous and beloved, but an actual royal princess? That's right, none other than Princess Diana was rumored to be a fan of the show, apparently once spending the afternoon watching it with Freddie Mercury, of all people. Sticky situation. Now, we know that Golden Girls occasionally enjoyed a bit of smutty humor and the odd innuendo or two. But in general, one could rely on it to be mostly a pretty wholesome show, or at least on the surface anyway. So you might be surprised to hear that Rue McClanahan once ended up handcuffed to a radiator. It was because her character, Blanche, did it as a protest against demolition, but then the key got lost and she got stuck. Explain yourself. When McClanahan accidentally got stuck, handcuffed to a radiator, many people on the set that day must have been pretty panicked about what to do. Because, let's face it, there's only one way to get out of handcuffs, with a key. But then, miraculously, one of the directors had an extra key. Phew! But then the rumor was that everyone started to tease him for having this key in the first place, and McClanahan was the first person to step in and defend him. Good for her. How to diagnose dementia. Lewy body dementia was found in Estelle Getty in 2000, and she quit acting. However, she showed early signs of the disease while she was still making The Golden Girls. Her co-stars noticed that she was having trouble remembering her lines and later wondered if this was a sign that she might be getting dementia. After hearing about Getty's illness, they called her, but she couldn't remember them or the show they worked on together. Being sad about the fact that she'll never remember one of the best times in her life seems impossible. Southern charm. Nowadays, we can't imagine the character of Blanche with anything other than her signature Southern accent. Isn't it just such an integral part of her iconic role? Well, you might be surprised to learn that she was originally supposed to have an Oklahoma accent, which is McClanahan's actual accent in real life. The original director wanted to keep that, but then the second director preferred the Southern accent. Golden Grub. We know how popular and beloved Golden Girls was and continues to be today, so it's no surprise to hear of adoring fans paying tribute to the iconic show. But one fan went much further than most, opening none other than a Golden Girls-themed cafe. LaRue opened in New York City, run by McClanahan's friend Michael J. LaRue. Did he change his name to suit his fandom? We're not sure, but we know the cafe used to be filled with memorabilia from the show. Rapid resurgence. Even though we know that Golden Girls was a mega hit back in the day and remains beloved in the hearts of fans, you may be surprised that even today, it's also gaining whole new populations of viewers. In April 2020, it became one of the most watched shows on streaming giant Hulu, with almost 11 million hours of the show being watched. After all, it was the ultimate quarantine treat. Golden Bros. Today's world still knows and loves Golden Girls, even though it originally aired so many years ago. And so much so that some of the biggest stars of today are still paying tribute to the iconic show. For example, Property Brothers stars Drew and Jonathan Scott revealed on The Kelly Clarkson Show that they want to renovate the classic house. Not only that, but Drew wanted to play Blanche in a reboot. Betty White's Centennial. On January 17, 2022, Betty White would have celebrated her 100th birthday. What an amazing achievement that would have been. and she was planning a birthday celebration with all fans could be a part of. To mark the occasion, she would have hosted a special movie event titled Betty White 100 Years Young – A Birthday Celebration. The film follows White in her day-to-day life. Unfortunately, Betty died just 17 days prior to what would have been her 100th birthday. The fourth wall. Isn't it odd when you watch a sitcom enough, it begins to feel like real life, and as if you're just a fly on the wall in these people's lives? But then you realize that you've never questioned certain obvious things, like why you only ever see one half of the room. Think of the iconic kitchen table where the girls often sat together. Did you ever notice that there were only 3 of them sitting there at a time? That's because the 4th chair would have had its back to the audience. Golden ratings. And it wasn't just the first few seasons of this classic show that were mega popular. Every year the show got more and more popular. So much so that by the time the show wrapped up for good in 1992, the season finale was so popular with a whopping 27.2 million people tuned in to watch the iconic moment. The show was golden in more ways than one. Goodbye, Pawn Stars. The Golden Girls' 7-season run finished with a memorable ending that included a terrible date, a cruel joke, a surprise wedding, and a sad farewell. Dorothy and Sophia's relationship as mother and daughter ended on a happy note in the ending, with a tearful goodbye between the 4 women. In the last show, which aired almost 30 years ago, B. Arthur's character gets married and moves away, which breaks up the group. Keeping house. As well as the iconic and beloved characters, one key element of the show was, of course, the much-loved Golden Girls house. If you were asked where this was, you'd say 6151 Richmond Street in Miami, right? This isn't even a real address. In real life, the exteriors of the shots were filmed in different places, in Brentwood for the first season and Hollywood Studios for the rest. Saying goodbye. Sadly, just a few weeks shy of her 100th birthday, Betty White passed away on December 31st, 2021. Even though Betty was about to be 100, I thought she'd live forever. I don't think Betty ever feared passing because she always wanted to be with her most beloved husband, Alan Ludden. She believed she'd be with him again, her agent and close friend Jeff Witches told People. But the show must go on, and the star-studded film event, Betty White 100 Years Young – A Birthday Celebration, was released as planned. It was in select theaters for one day on what would have been her 100th birthday, January 17th. Thank you for your service. Today, fans around the world are incredibly admiring and grateful to all the Golden Girls stars. After all, they've given us all years of delight and amusement, and even today, we enjoy their work. But did you know that B. Arthur has served us all in another way? Because before her TV stardom, she served as a U.S. Marine. She served there as a typist, truck driver, and dispatcher before becoming a star. Talk about multi-talented! Waving goodbye. Betty White might have been in love with her character, but B. Arthur didn't feel the same way. Her disdain for the show started growing as the years went by, and the journey of the Golden Girls came to an end when she decided to leave. By the start of the 7th season, B made it very clear that she was done. She thought the quality was starting to slip. She wanted to go out while it was still a good show, and she felt she was done with it. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon